Hey everyone, and welcome to our preview on how to build a revenue generating digital product or service in 90 to 180 days. So this is for a preview for our UX entrepreneurship service design course at UX Woman. And so some topics that we're going to cover today are, of course, who is this course for? And, do your interests align with this course to begin with? Four mindset shifts for how to build a business or freelance and start your own freelancing UX business. We're going to talk about some student stories, our story at UX Woman, our mission at UX Woman, and then talk about, 10 tips to start building a revenue generating business in 90 to 180 days. And then if you're interested in the course, we can talk about the curriculum and next steps. So who is this course for? At UX Woman, we serve women, immigrants, people of color, folks from the LGBTQ community, UX learners and job seekers alike. And we're also serving folks who are interested in learning advanced UX topics. So we've worked with bootcamp grads and Google Coursera certificate grads who've taken our 7-month UX design MBA program. But for this course in particular, it's really for those folks who are really interested in starting their own freelance or UX consultancies, working in service design, taking on UX gig work, as well as, some of the folks looking to build their UX project ideas and turn them into startups or businesses or side hustles. Who this course is not for. So we're not, trying to create a shortcut to making money. Spoiler alert, there is no shortcut. You have to do it the hard way and the ethical way. So folks who do not want to thoroughly learn how and why business models and marketing strategies work and the psychology behind the marketing and product positioning. We really here believe in ethical product and service design. So we really talk about, building a product that aligns with your values and your mission, as well as your brand identity, as unique as it might be. And so, we're really not trying to serve the folks who, don't know what UX is. And we recommend really learning the basics of the UX process, especially if you're getting into freelance UX work. We would recommend some more study in UX before you get into freelance. Freelance is really more for folks who are sort of in their mid-careers and who fully understand the UX process and can really hit the ground running to build their own UX freelance work and consulting. So some key metrics around why you might want to consider building a UX freelance business or consulting business or your own startup side hustle or business is that, right now, as of, 2025, 36% of US professionals right now participate in the gig economy. And this economy is projected to grow to $1.85 billion in terms of a market by 2032. And so gig work can include anything like freelance work, starting a business or side hustle, or participating as a gig worker for established brands like Uber, Amazon, Lyft, Airbnb, you name it. And there's currently 33 million small businesses in the US currently. And by small businesses, that's defined as less than 500 employees. And they actually make up a significant portion of the US GDP. And they actually employ over half the US workforce. So even though small businesses are not sexy and they're not the FAANG companies and you don't hear about them every day, they are almost the backbone of the US economy. And, you should consider joining this force. However, despite the fact that, small businesses employ half of all US employees, they make up about 99.9% of US businesses. So it's really that top 0.1% of businesses that are the really big conglomerates, the really big brand names that are employing the other half of the US workforce. And, this might surprise you, but 8 out of 10 small businesses have no employees. So that means everyone's a gig worker or a contract worker, or it might be a solo entrepreneur or a partnership business. And so it kind of gets at the humble beginnings of a startup or side hustle, and it doesn't need to grow into something fancy or something that is, a multiple person team working full time around an initiative to be a successful business. In fact, I know a lot of single person brands and businesses making over $1 million, and that is the excitement in the gig economy and the creator economy. So size doesn't necessarily mean scale. And so, I really believe that creating a solo entrepreneur small business or side hustle can be a great source of monthly or annual recurring revenue for folks, especially if you start by considering monetization from day one. So the big part about this course and some of the tips we're going to give you is that you should be considering monetization strategies and how to build something revenue generating from day one, rather than only focusing on the product idea or the service idea. And, creating a solo entrepreneur, small business, or side hustle can be a great source of additional income, even if you are committed to a full-time job. So I think we are in an economy where you can sort of have multiple fingers and multiple pies, so to speak. So full-time work can definitely be one of your sources of income, but a side hustle is also a great additional source. Investing is another source where, you can have safety nets just in case you need it, right? And, with the economy being what it is and job markets being what they are, it's always good to have additional sources of income. And so from an ethical perspective, another aspect of entrepreneurship that's really exciting is that we have the power to be the change that we want to see, right? Right now, small businesses make up 99.9% of all businesses, and they're the one enforcing those small changes, that small local impact, right? Or maybe regional impact. Those 0.1% of large brands and corporates are not going to be the change that you want to see. They are just too big. They're too focused on a very specific product or service, and they're focused on revenue and scaling at this stage. So I think, it's no secret that we can't expect change from a big corporate like Facebook or Meta. And, we see these kind of headlines more and more often in the news. This is from 2019, but you can see that, the critique on Meta has gotten even more, intense in 2025. And we're starting to see that, maybe that dream we were sold of working in a big FANG company or corporate like Meta or Amazon or Google or Apple is maybe not the dream. It's maybe not as trumped up as, people say. And that maybe it's not as fulfilling as a job or a role when you might be making a very small impact at corporate, right? You might be a tiny drop in a very big ocean, but as a startup solo entrepreneur, you could have a lot more impact and, really face the ocean and, really impact people directly, whether that's your customers or your clients. So I think there's something to be said in questioning whether a big corporate brand on your resume is really worth it. And I'll share my 2 cents working across a variety of companies. So I've had a 9-year career in UX. I've worked as a UX researcher, as a product designer, as a generalist, and I've worked across startups, consulting, corporate. I've worked for brands like Disney, Hulu, Marvel, Squarespace, Meta, J&J, Ford. And yes, it's definitely exciting to work for big brands and see how they do what they do. But at the same time, I have to say that the most fulfilling work I have ever done has been as an entrepreneur, running UX Woman as a solo entrepreneur, and really making an impact directly and kind of keep staying in charge of my mission and my values as they've changed and evolved throughout my career. And I'll talk more about that when I talk about our mission as well. But, seeing these types of headlines should make you question, what kind of business do you want to start? If there was going to be a headline about your business 10 years from now, when your business is scaled into multi-million dollars worth of a company, what do you want people saying about you and your values and your mission? And, how would you feel if some of these were the headlines about your business? So really kind of taking that time to think about, how do you want to grow ethically? And is it worth it to grow to a certain level? Because, at a certain point in time, especially when we're thinking about companies like Amazon, it's growing for growing's sake, right? And it's almost like, there's growth that is sustainable and growth that is life generating versus growth that is almost like a cancer or a tumor. And I would say at this point, with the critique going on with all these big corporates, that growth is more cancerous and tumorous rather than, I'm not even sure if that's a word, but rather than, sustainable growth, positive growth that actually helps people. And so I think there's one thing a lot of us can agree on is that big corporates aren't going to fix big problems with the world today, right? So if you were looking at big corporate to be the solution, maybe you're a little naive at this stage, but big corporates are focused on profits, their own profits, their bottom line, growing their business. And at the moment, I would say whether ethically or not is really up for debate. And very few big corporates really uphold the values, ethics that they profess to hold, right? They're constantly shape-shifting. They're constantly chasing revenue or chasing, the right politicians to do their bidding, right? So we as consumers really end up needing to hold them accountable with our spending habits instead, because they're not going to hold themselves accountable. They want deregulation. They don't want to be held accountable. And that's where entrepreneurship can come up as this weird, unique hero, because when corporates don't want to be held accountable, new brands and innovative entrepreneurs and startups and businesses can come up and disrupt the system for the better. And we're going to have, case studies that I show you later on about this and how that comes about. So at UX Woman, we're really focused on building innovative products and services that disrupt the status quo with ethical and inclusive design in mind. And we are inspired to, with brands who turn to inclusive design and marketing into success stories that generate large revenues. So it is a myth, in my opinion, and it is a huge lie that inclusive design is not revenue generating. Inclusive design is what brings large user groups and markets together. And the really successful companies, the companies worth billions of dollars and doing well, even while other companies are suffering right now with tariffs and the economy, are those companies that really value inclusive design and a global approach towards solving problems. So my first example is Netflix, right? Netflix focus on connecting the world with a focus on telling stories from around the world, providing unique and different points of views with their Netflix originals. And this OG streamer actually ended up scaling to over 180 countries because they were so good at telling localized stories. They really had to have an inclusive design and inclusive marketing approach in mind to be able to scale at that level. And I can tell you, as someone who used to work for Disney, that Disney Plus and Amazon are way behind, and it's no secret, right? And it's no secret because they are not as inclusive in their culture, in their marketing, in their design. And it is only when you can really consider other markets' perspectives and their unique approach to life can you really create very personalized products and services, especially in the entertainment business where you're really pulling on people's heartstrings with your storytelling. And if your story just doesn't hit, you're not going to go anywhere. I can tell you right now, India is not, I immigrated from India when I was 9. India doesn't care about Amazon Prime and Disney Plus, but guess what? We know about Netflix. And another example I would like to provide is Fenty Beauty. So Fenty Beauty focused on providing 40 to 50 color foundation options for women, especially for darker skin tones and lighter skin tones, when most brands only provided 20 to 30. And that ability to be more inclusive of women whose skin tones were not covered by, most of the mainstream brands led Fenty Beauty to become more than $1 billion success, right? So right now, I think they're at 2.6 billion. And it changed the status quo because all these other companies had to start catching up. And after Fenty Beauty was launched and released, and they saw the billions of dollars of success that Rihanna had with Fenty Beauty and such an inclusive design and marketing approach, a lot of the mainstream brands that only offered 20 to 30 colors started to offer 40 to 50 colors. And Fenty is just changing the game in terms of coverage for all women of all skin tones and all colors. So we really need to embrace 4 key mindsets so that we can design ethical businesses, creating revenue generating products, services, or freelancing and consulting work. And the first thing to really keep in mind if you're excited, especially if you're going to build a revenue generating business in 90 to 180 days, and you're going to hold yourself accountable to build a revenue generating business in 3 to 6 months, is that no business is perfect. It's as good as the strengths and limitations of its creators, right? So we see this in big companies all the time, right? What's the difference between Netflix and Disney Plus and Amazon? It's people, the innovation cultures at these different companies. What's the difference between Google and Apple, right? It's the innovation culture. So a business is only as good or as the folks in it and their strengths and their limitations. And so, for a lot of folks who are just starting to build a small business, it might be hard for us to let go of our perfectionist tendencies and focusing on building, we want to build something perfect, but that can lead us to procrastinate. It can lead us to doubt ourselves and overthink. And so we have to get comfortable not being perfect, right? And failing often and frequently so that we can succeed the next time around. And sometimes this means really just focusing on our existing strengths and expertise, but also keeping in mind our weaknesses and limitations so that we know to get help when it's needed. And so growing a business might mean evolving and releasing these certain self-limiting beliefs in order to take bigger leaps and bigger risks as you're growing and running the business. And when starting a small business or side hustle, it's really important to also go where nobody else goes, right? There's a lot of folks who might just want to do what a competitor does or just pull up a list of competitors and kind of try to copycat them. But the thing is, you're always going to be 3 steps behind competitors if you take that approach. Our curriculum really focuses on blue ocean strategy and inclusive design because we like to help our cohorts come up with really innovative ideas for products and services that focus on invisible markets and invisible communities, because that's where the opportunity is. That's where, from a business perspective, we call those undersaturated markets. Opportunities that nobody else sees quite yet, right? When you think about Airbnb, when you think about Uber, they were trailblazers of innovation. And they completely disrupted the system of how hospitality industries and transportation industries work today. So really resist that urge to copycat a competitor business, because you will always be behind. But if you follow your own path, if you go where nobody else goes, that's when you will be 3 steps ahead, maybe 5 steps ahead. And it's also really important to prioritize design, monetization, and marketing all at once. It's not about linear thinking, but it's more about taking on this holistic approach instead. So in building a business, we have to become incredible multitaskers and we have to see the big picture. We cannot do things linearly, right? It's not about having a linear mindset or a deductive or inductive mindset. It's not always logical or methodical. Though some aspects of building a business are, it's also important to have a associative mindset. So connecting the dots that others might not see right away. And this will help us switch back and forth between different tasks, different backgrounds, whether it's design, monetization, marketing, operations, processes, legal, and we can switch back and forth between these different types of topics, and we can see how everything connects holistically, which is really, really crucial for building a successful business. If you try to do it one step at a time, that's not really going to work. It's more about being a juggler, right? You can't just juggle one ball. It's more about juggling multiple balls, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And yes, you don't have to get to 5 balls all at once, but you do have to be able to juggle multiple balls. And there's, I think, also an element to the psychology behind talking to team members, stakeholders, clients, customers, investors, and all of this is really invaluable in building a business. So in our curriculum, we really cover cognitive psychology, sales psychology, stakeholder psychology, covering how to approach user interviews, sales calls, stakeholder and investor meetings, pitches, storytelling. There's different psychological approaches for each situation, and you have to be able to tell a really compelling story or build a really impactful pitch, all while making sure you're asking the right questions so that the other party feels seen and heard, and then can respond and actually listen to the story that you have to offer as well. And this, if you can master the skill set, then you would be a really successful entrepreneur or even UX freelancer or designer. And so as future business owners and entrepreneurs, we have the potential to make an impact within an industry we really care about, and about a cause that we feel passionate about as well. And we have the power to define and follow our own visions, adjusting as we go rather than being beholden to the visions and dreams of others when we're working in a big corporate or another company, for example. And with that power to define our own visions also comes a lot of responsibility and accountability around how we are going to do what we set out to do. And do we do it in an ethical, thoughtful manner, intentional manner? And so our mentees have gone on to build really successful AI products, and they come from an entrepreneurial background. So Ashley is one example. She's a business owner for a beauty salon and went through our 7-month UX Design MBA program to build and learn the end-to-end design process. And she worked with us to scope an AI scheduler and product recommender tool for beauty salon owners to maintain better customer relationships. And her product was an AI-based chatbot, and it included scheduling beauty appointments, handling cancellations and reschedules, recommending products post-appointment, and basically increasing the ROI for salon owners with more efficiently booked schedules and fewer cancels. And so that was the value proposition. And Ashley herself had faced that problem as a salon owner and knew exactly what her target market needed. And so, this has really helped her build more offerings in the startup world and community. And our mentees have also gone on to balance entrepreneurship and corporate work. So Alia landed a UX research role at Reddit as layoffs persisted in the job market, and she pivoted from market research. And a fun fact about Alia is that she also has a really entrepreneurial spirit. So she had launched 2 startups prior to joining us, and wanted to continue with that startup culture. And she continues to build her own side projects and side hustles as she's working at Reddit. She's both an incredible entrepreneur and UX researcher, and she doesn't let herself be placed in one box, right? You don't have to choose one or the other. And so her approach was really to land that corporate job for financial security and to grow as a UX researcher. But she also wanted to apply her skill sets towards building a side hustle or startup, creating a product for herself in the digital space. And I have also failed at multiple startups and tried my way through a bunch of different roles and opportunities, and that's kind of shaped what I want to do with my career. And so that's something I'll share with you right now. My name is Samaya. I'm the founder at UX Woman. I have 9 years of expertise across startups, consulting, and corporate. I mentioned some of the brands that I had worked for that tend to be really big names, and I've been incredibly grateful to be able to work with really creative people at these brands. But I just ended up finding entrepreneurship and solo entrepreneurship the most fulfilling aspect of my life, and that's where I am currently. And I'll talk a little bit about how I got there. So my early career was really chaotic, to say the least. I studied mechanical engineering at Carnegie Mellon, and I got my first job as a customer service manager or customer success manager at an ed tech startup. And I was there for about 8 or 9 months, I believe. That's where I met my co-founder, and we were really young, right? We were 21, 22. And we were just very naive. We had all these big ideas for the startup. We were the only 2 women at the startup. And it was not a very thoughtful environment for 2 young women, right? Our ideas weren't taken very seriously. They might have also been naive, I'm not sure. And we just didn't feel like we were growing. We were more tasked in assistant roles, in helping roles, but we were never allowed to take on leadership opportunities or really make the impact that we wanted to make. So we both were kind of dissatisfied in that job, which led both of us into UX. So in my early career, I got my first UX research job in consulting, and then another one setting up UX research practices at a corporate company. And I still felt that there was something missing, even though I had done consulting and I had worked for big brands like Johnson and Johnson and Ford and Meta. I only saw the design side, right? My expertise was very, very specific to UX research and UX design. And when I started to set up research practices at the corporation I worked for after I left consulting, I realized working closely with senior stakeholders and executives that I was really missing the business aspect. I was not really connecting design to how design would impact the business, how design would make an impact on revenue, on conversion rates, on the bottom line, on costs, and having a very rigorous quantitative a business-minded approach to design. And that was something I lacked, and I was unable to tell a convincing enough story to a lot of stakeholders about why design and research were so necessary. Sometimes my pitch made sense, sometimes it didn't, and I couldn't fully, at that point in time, articulated why research was so necessary and how to pitch certain research initiatives to executives. So I went back to school. I went back to grad school. It was a 2-year program, and it was an interdisciplinary program at UPenn, where I studied business at Wharton, design at the design school, and engineering. And I, had a very holistic approach to the design process and design thinking. And I designed products that were physical products, furniture, spaces, digital products, you name it, right? So our program wasn't just focused on digital design, but really every aspect of design and entrepreneurship. And that's when it started to click. I had started a freelance consulting business prior to joining UPenn and my grad program. It had failed. I started another startup, which was a digital business called Positive. It was a dog Tinder app during grad school, and it received some funding from the school, but it also failed. And so as I was failing at these startups or trying to, find some sort of success in these startups, I realized that I didn't want the traditional route that I thought I wanted before. So before I had joined grad school, I thought that I would go to grad school and then work my way up in my UX career as a UX lead and a UX manager, which I eventually did. But I, realized that, my real passion was entrepreneurship. So out of grad school, I did land my first UX management role. I did go on to become a UX lead at large brand names like Disney and Hulu and Marvel. And I did look really, really good on paper. But unfortunately, it wasn't that success of looking good on paper that really made me excited to, show up and create every day. What really got me excited was working with folks at Ideate Labs. So at that same time, I had started a side hustle or business with a co-founder called Ideate Labs. And we do something similar to what we do at UX Woman, where we help folks break into tech and break into UX. And that was what was really fulfilling to me. And in Ideate Labs, that was the first successful business that I created after 2 failures, right? So we grew our community to over 50K learners. We impacted hundreds of women and, gave them a UX education. And that was so much more impactful than anything I could do from my perspective at Disney or any of these big corporates, because I was just a small drop there, right? I was just a cog in the wheel, so to speak. And so I just didn't feel like I had made as much of an impact. And that was kind of what was going on internally for me. And that's when I started to kind of really define for myself what success means, right? Everyone tells you that success means that you have to go be a manager at a large corporate, at a large FANG company. And that's kind of the expectation that society puts on you. And that's what I see a lot of, entry level and junior designers want to be. And that's what I wanted to be, back when I was, more of an entry level UX designer and researcher. But as I started to achieve what I wanted to achieve, and as I started to look good on paper, like I thought that was my life plan, I realized I actually didn't want those things. Instead, I just wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to follow my own vision. My co-founder and I split up last year. and we went our separate ways. And as I was building curriculum in inclusive design for, Disney, Hulu, Marvel, ABC, and FX, I also saw all the roadblocks firsthand on how to get something to be more inclusive and how to convince senior stakeholders or really conservative elements of the company about inclusive design and like how inclusive design could impact the bottom line and increase market share in different countries or increase reach to different audiences. And unfortunately, it fell on deaf ears, right? And I just didn't feel that it made the impact that I was hoping to make. But with UX Woman and with Ideate Labs, we were really making an impact. And so I realized that to truly be, if I really want to focus on inclusive design and marketing, I really had to come back to grassroots organizations and create a grassroots organization of my own that really truly upholds the values of inclusive design and marketing to the best of my abilities. Being a small startup, I don't have the resources of Disney behind me. But I do have the vision and I do have just the gumption to go do it, right? And so that's how I founded UX Woman this year, based on my values and my commitment to helping women, immigrants, the LGBTQ community, people of color break into tech or even create successful revenue generating businesses. And I'm not saying that inclusive design is not possible in these large corporates. I just mean that there's a lot more fighting and a lot more arguing and a lot more communicating that you have to do to get your inclusive design principles to be heard at these large corporates, especially in certain work cultures. The Hulu culture is extremely innovative and extremely inclusive, but some other cultures are not so inclusive across those brands that I worked for. And so it just comes back to culture, right? And when you build your own company, you can define that culture. You can define the values and really stick to them. And our mission at UX Woman is really, again, to help women, immigrants, folks from the LGBTQ community, and people of color break into tech, earn six-figure salaries, or create revenue-generating businesses. And so now we're going to kind of dive into those 10 tips for creating a revenue-generating digital business or service in 90 to 180 days. So the first tip is to really plan for monetization from day one to distinguish your idea as a business and not just a project. So this is what the distinction I see between designers who want to break into corporate or consulting versus designers who have more of that entrepreneurial edge, is that the designers who are thinking of breaking into corporate are thinking more about just the UX side of things and the user experience, as opposed to both user experience and monetization. The more entrepreneurial-minded designers are thinking about monetization from day one and really focusing their ideas to monetization so they can become a lot better at scoping their MVP or minimum viable product to be something that monetizes from day one. And so in module 1, what we like to do is just cover setting up, forming a company and forming a business in the first place, whether that's an LLC, S Corp, Inc. We really want to start to consider company formation, business tax, business insurance, and setting up bare bones resources that you need to start to set up your business, whether that's website and inventory. And it's okay that you may not have a final idea at this stage. You might have a vague idea for what your topic is going to be, but you just want to get a sense of understanding basic costs and revenue needed to just start a business. And when you see those basic costs, it's not much, but it is enough for you to question, okay, if these are the costs, it could be anywhere between $500 to $2,000, right? Now, how do I get that money back, right? Because I just invested that money into this business or into the formation of the business. So how do I get that money back? And it starts you kind of thinking about monetization from day one when you kind of start to build the nuts and bolts for yourself. As opposed to if you were joining a company, you don't have to think about these types of costs. So you're really focused on product and user experience. Number 2, identify your target market and consider blue ocean strategy and the competition. So that's what we really focus on in module 2. We want to be strategic about choosing a target market as a small business, identifying that invisible market or those invisible communities where there's less competition, right? We don't want to be copycats. We don't want to go where other competitors are. And this is Blue Ocean strategy in a nutshell. And we dive into Blue Ocean strategy in a lot of detail to analyze different markets and different competitors, indirect and direct, to really see where those hidden opportunities are. Where are those invisible markets? And then we start to identify the most urgent problem our target market has through sales call interviews. So remember that, we're not true UX folks at this stage. We are wearing our entrepreneurial hat. We need to do problem identification, but frame it as a sales call or a strategy call. And that forces you to think about monetization and business strategy from day one, right? And when we create these sales call interviews, it's a different set of psychological principles that we need to keep in mind than when we're doing user interviews or discovery interviews for UX research. So it's just a different type of interview. And we really, at this stage, need to really understand our client problems or our user problems, but we also need to frame our call as an offering based on what we are trying to learn from our audiences. So it's really more of this mixed method approach that creates the distinction between working on a business versus working on a project or product idea. So you really have to always be selling. So even as you're talking and framing the sales call and gathering this information, you're still kind of coming up with a offer, or you'll tell them you're putting an offer together for them particularly, so that you can keep maintaining that relationship. So it's not just about gathering information, but more for relationship maintenance, because eventually that person could be one of your first customers. And we then start to use cheap and code-free techniques to create monetizable prototypes and test launches. So because we're so monetization focused, that's why we had to set up the business and take care of things like business insurance from day one, so that we are doing things legally and so that we can, have a terms and conditions in place as we start to market and sell some of our different prototype ideas. And we want to start to test the impact of our ideas and basically kill any idea that is not monetizable. So if it's not being monetized, if no one's willing to pay for it, at the end of the day, is it really a successful idea, or is it an idea worth pursuing? That's the judgment call that we need to make. And sometimes that means taking an additional pass at that prototype, right? A lot of designers stop at that phase and they're like, oh, this prototype didn't work. But as a business thinker, as a marketing thinker, you also have to think about product positioning, crafting a compelling offer about your product or service, and really frame the prototype or idea from that perspective in mind. Thinking about, really mastering creative marketing copywriting. So, it could be that you have a really great prototype idea, but when you ran that experiment, you maybe just didn't frame the offering in a way that your customers understood or really got it at an emotional level. And so, it might take a lot of time to go back to the chopping board and learn the psychology behind product positioning, creating those compelling offers, writing creative marketing copy that sells your product and service. And you might have to come up with multiple iterations of that product positioning, right? You might have one idea, but you might need to frame that idea in 10 different ways. And only then might you, realize that your product is actually selling. So just because it doesn't sell right away doesn't mean it's a failure. It might mean that you need to massage your product positioning and the way you're crafting your marketing and copywriting. And then again, as we're getting into really doing a better job with our copywriting, and we might be starting to make some of our first sales, we also need to know what marketing strategies we need to employ, right? And we need to pressure test a variety of marketing strategies across a variety of marketing channels. As it turns out, our customers and prospective clients live on multiple areas of the internet. They might be on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Meta. They might be in physical stores or distribution brands, and we have to go find where they are. And so we need to really think about marketing strategies and how they vary across each of these marketing and distribution channels, and how we need to tailor our storytelling and positioning to each of those channels. And then we also often will pressure test multiple marketing channels before focusing on a few of them, because we can't possibly focus on all of them from day one, but we have to focus on the most strategic ones, right? So as you're starting to get your first sales, how can you start to create this pipeline from these different marketing channels and with these different marketing strategies in place to continue to build a pipeline of prospective customers. And that's when we start to get into focusing on building sales funnels based on quantitative data gathered. So as you're starting to pressure test these marketing funnels or marketing strategies across these marketing, distribution channels, we need to start to think about quantitative business strategies and methods to really pressure test our sales funnels and optimize our sales funnels. So in a startup and small business, we learn to rigorously use that quantitative data to make decisions on the success or failure of our product and marketing ideas and strategies. And we create this robust testing process around our sales funnel so that we can keep optimizing it. And this is what will ultimately lead to scaling the business over time into something that's even more successful. And, as we're doing this, we have to also balance. Remember, being an entrepreneur is very associative. So you're not just doing one thing at once, but you're doing multiple things at once. And so, this kind of storytelling becomes really crucial. How do you tell a story across multiple marketing channels, reworking your brand for different types of customers and different investors alike, right? You're telling the same story about this product. At this point, you're starting to hit on one product idea being the biggest success. But how can you tell 10 or 20 different stories about that one product idea? So how might we craft a compelling business offering to clients or customers or investors or stakeholders or even partners? And the way we pitch something or tell the story is going to change depending on who the audience is, even if the product stays the same. And then we also have to, start to think about gig work in particular. So all these tips I've been telling you are applicable to both building a digital product or service. But when it comes to gig work, contracts, or pitching services to prospective business clients, we also have to go the additional layer of creating contracts and project plans and scoping projects and services. And so the scoping process is actually the sales process, and scaled life cycles for this type of work might be a lot lengthier than they are for selling a digital product or service. So that's something to just be aware of. You're really selling based on how you scope and how you educate your client on your services. So how might we sell our services to large brands or form brand partnerships and collaborations? What type of contracts, projects, plans, and scope do we need to define so that we can get paid? And a scope might not come up in just 1 or 2 weeks. It might take months of scoping an idea or project with a prospective client until something is finalized in paper so that you can get to work on it. And so finally, as you're getting to module 10, you've over this like multidisciplinary holistic process, you've built the bare bones of your business. You've pressure tested multiple product ideas. You've pressure tested multiple marketing ideas until you've narrowed down on one product idea or service idea and 1 or 2 marketing strategies or channels to focus on. You're constantly evolving your product positioning and the way you pitch and the way you tell your story. And now you're starting to focus on optimizing and scaling those business processes, scaling that business funnel that you already have, and really scaling that business model that you have over time. So again, we're going to reapproach business models in this module and scaling and consider things from scale. So as we put together that simplest version of our business in those first 90 to 180 days, how do we start to optimize our processes and marketing and product or service to scale? And that's something to consider as well. So those are my 10 tips for you. I hope that they were helpful. If you are interested in our UX entrepreneurship and service design course, I recommend that you enroll today. The cost of the course is $490. It's a 3 hours of lecture-based content, including case studies. We provide business templates to build your own revenue-generating business from 0 to 1. I provide a 30-minute business strategy consult so that you can talk about some of your ideas or how you're going through the program. And you can use the discount code 10OFF to get 10% off on the price. So thank you so much for listening in on these 10 tips, and I hope to see you in class.